So I guess Matrix will be joining, right? Because he's
No, he's not.
the only one in the agenda, right?
Yeah, that's true. No, but he said he couldn't make it. But we offered to just take a poke at it and start the discussion and then bring it up again next
Okay.
on the next meeting. All depending on how it goes, I guess. But yeah, welcome everyone for another Spec 3.0 meeting. Before getting started, does any one of you want to say hi, introduce yourself before we jump into the agenda? Okay, I guess not.
Hi.
Do you want to? Say hi to Fran.
Please do. Say hi to me.
I would say hi, but I don't have my headset, so I'm staying in a public place, so I'm just listening to you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, no, well, welcome, man. Are you going through like great, so we can't hear that you don't have a headset, so it's all good. All right, so since Magic is not here to introduce his own topic, does any one of you want to introduce it, or should I take the crack at it?
If you want, I can take the initiative of telling you that you should introduce it.
What a complex way of saying that I should do it. All right, well, let's dive into it. So Magic is proposing to extend the schema object with a property that defines the schema format. One of the problems that we have currently is that whenever you define a message within 2.0, you can, within the message schema or the message object, you can define the schema format. And then you can, within the message, you can define what the payload is. And this is what, so the schema format defines exactly what the message payload is defined with. For example, in this case, it's with the async API schema object. The problem is that when we do reusability of these schemas, it's not possible to define what the schema format is outside of the message object. So this means that you cannot, within the components where you define your custom schema with whatever format you choose to define it with, it's not possible to define it with it's currently not possible to define it with anything other than the async API schema object. So you cannot define it with Avro, you cannot define it with JSON schema draft, whatever we have, or any other types. And the reason is that the schema itself cannot define this schema format property. So it cannot self-define what the schema format is. Now with Magic's proposal, or let me chill. Does that make sense for everyone? Okay. So Magic's proposal is to introduce kind of a wrapper around the schema object. So instead of just only defining this part right here as a schema, you also define the schema format, basically moving the property away from the message object and into the schema. So it's self-defining. What this introduces is the ability to reuse different schema formats within one async API file, because now you can reference this specific schema and it already knows what exactly the schema format is. So this means you can have Avro defined within components, you can have all of the other possibilities. Now, I haven't read his proposal in full to be able to explain the nitty details of all of the different perspectives. But if we take a look at his PR proposal, so he's proposing a new. Is this readable, by the way, for everyone? Hope it is.
I think it will be a little bit bigger, but yeah, it is readable for me. But yeah, just
This.
Yeah, might be.
Let's see. I can do it as
much, maybe, I don't
know. I'm kind of watching the live stream just to see how. Now it's definitely visible for everyone, I think.
I mean, no, it is okay. In the video, it's okay. I was just thinking, people with difficulty to read, with sight problems and things
let me paste the. Let me paste the issue or the pull request as well, so you can follow along. All right, so I posted it on YouTube as well. All right, so he introduces this new keyword, custom schema, which should belong to the schema object, described by the custom schema object. Not sure what that is. Okay. Yeah. So yes, so the references and how you reference the schemas is not changed. Then he wants to deprecate the schema format property within the message object instead of removing it, I guess, entirely, which I'm not so sure makes sense, but all right. Is published alongside custom.
So it says it's deprecated, but this is targeting version 3, right? So we should probably just completely remove it, like instead of deprecating it.
That makes more sense to me.
I mean, since it's a major version bump, right?
Yeah,
cool.
I see he kind of mixes between this property schema format and format, so I guess that's not entirely defined either. And the same with schema.
I was going to mention that maybe schema, repeating schema all the time, like we're already inside schemas, right? So we know that this is a schema. This is the format of the schema because we're inside the schema, right? So that is, I think it's unnecessary to repeat the word schema, and also not just for schema format, but for schema definition, right? And that's why, and I think it was from another call that we came up with this, or maybe it was a one-on-one with him, I can't remember, but that we talk about it, about having, like format and the definition of the schema. So yeah, it's clear. It's a custom schema. So we know it's a schema, right?
Yeah, I think that makes sense as well. All right, so scratch the schema format and the schema properties and replace it with definition and format. That's his proposal.
I wonder though, one thing I want to mention that it says definition, and for instance, with async API schema object and with JSON schema, which is almost essentially the same, you don't define the data, but you defined the rules for validating the data, right? So the constraints of the data. So I don't know, just thinking out loud here that definition might be confusing. I don't know, or maybe not. Maybe it's just myself.
So you think it's confusing when it is a JSON schema that's being, if the format is JSON schema, then the definition keyword doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, that is, I mean, it's a definition, so that is correct. But yeah, maybe it can be misleading. That is the definition. People can think that this is the definition of the data. But it is not the definition of the data. It is the definition of, never mind. I think we should work on this at some point, like we should just get rid of this and maybe create a vocabulary for code generation, something like that. And that's the vocabulary we will use for code generation, and that's it. And yeah, I think at some point we'll have to do it. Otherwise, we're always going to have this problem that some formats are for defining the data shape, and some other formats like JSON schema are for defining the data, not the data, sorry, the validation rules.
Yeah,
which is completely different, right? So yeah.
It's a huge difference from a tooling perspective. Let's just leave it at
yes, and the concept as well. The concept itself, yeah. Like I may have a bunch of validation rules that says nothing about the type, right?
Yes.
So yeah. So or about the structure. Like I may want to validate that something is a number, but it doesn't say which kind of number. If it's an integer, a double, a float, or what, right? Or a bigger one, right? So I don't know. So yeah. Anyway, not for this issue. So yeah.
So moving on, so he also introduces documentation fields, and I think he took that from basically what we have in JSON schema as keywords to define some metadata about it, right? So for example, title, description, external docs. So you are able to define, instead of defining it down here within the definition of the schema itself, where you use a specific format, we have something that's more abstracted away from whatever you can define within one format, and define it from an async API perspective, right? And this is also with external docs, but I see that he introduces them around custom schema, which is apparently a property that he wants to use to define whatever the schema is for. So yeah,
that's confusing
a little bit.
What custom schema was the name of the schema?
I think this is the custom schema object, custom schema. So I think he wants to wrap or at least the proposal is, but I don't see why it can't be a part of, like, within this object right here. So basically just moving those into this, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's see what else there is. Model using nested custom schemas. Okay, so okay, interesting. So he has an example here where he kind of mixes JSON schema and custom schema formats.
Ooh.
Or at least that's how it looks like. So we have this JSON schema rules where it defines that it must be an object where it has specific types of properties. We have grades and we have student. Now the student property within this object looks like it should be a custom format. Or
Maciek, you got too far, I guess. I'm not sure I like this. I think this is going to add a huge complexity to the schema land that it's probably unnecessary. So, and I'm saying probably, and it's interesting. Yeah. But I have the feeling that this is going to add, not the feeling, this is for sure going to add a lot of complexity to all the schema stuff, right? So building tooling around it will be super complicated, super complex, because you can expect any kind of schema in any of the child properties at any point. And like mixing JSON schema with Avro and with I don't know, something else, RAML data types maybe, or protobuf in the future maybe as well. So yeah, interesting but necessary.
I think as soon as you start defining something within a specific format, it doesn't make sense to mix it with other formats.
Yes, that's what I was about to say. Like if you're using JSON schema, just stick to JSON schema. If you use Avro, you stick to Avro.
Yeah.
If you are in the middle of a transition from JSON schema to Avro, maybe then you find it useful, but you are in the transition. At some point, you're not gonna need this anymore. So maybe then in this case, it's something that people should be taking care of, not us, because it's for, you know, like for a transitional state. If this transitional state is taking forever, and then it's not transitional anymore, it's a stable state. I think I've never found this case, to be honest. Like I've always seen people using Avro or JSON schema or protobuf, but they never told me I want to mix them all, right? So yeah. So I think it's funny. It's interesting from a engineering point of view, but is it solving a real problem?
Maybe we need Matek's opinion here.
Yeah.
Missing is why it's there, right?
I'm asking these questions because I know he will watch the recording, and that's why. So he can take the opportunity to reply later. So yeah. So this is an asynchronous conversation with Matek.
It is. We're asking him questions that he can answer later.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So he also tries to introduce this in terms of references. So here we can kind of mix and match what our ref keyword or the reference object is now a much looser type. So it's not constrained to, or at least that's what I think he's trying to do. It's not as constrained to only being able to define JSON or YAML references.
Well, Avro is JSON.
Avro is, but I think he has okay, he doesn't. Never mind. I might have been jumping the conclusion. No, it was because he has some protobuf examples in his issue where I had a feeling that he wanted to introduce it so you can reference non-JSON and YAML files. So you can externally reference a protobuf file, for example. If
that's the case, I already explored this alternative. There is an issue. I think that it's already closed, but it's there. I'll try to find it. And there is a problem with the JSON pointer. You know, like the JSON pointer is the last part that you add at the end of the URL on $ref. You know, like the hashtag / component / blah blah blah. This syntax is a JSON pointer syntax. There's an RFC for this, so it's a standard, and that it's meant to work only with JSON. Yeah. So I played trying to make it work with XSD, with XML, and with protobuf, and yeah, we could kinda hack it. It's a hack.
I can imagine you could,
yeah, it's a hack. It's not meant to be for non-JSON formats, right? And YAML, it works with YAML because YAML is, you know, translatable to JSON, at least the subset of YAML that we accept, because we don't accept full YAML, right? So yeah, so that's why we accept to point to YAML, because yeah, it's JSON in another format, so in another language. Yeah. But yeah, I wouldn't go that far introducing a replacement for $ref or something like that. At least not in the same ISO or PR, because that's a lot.
So references work fine with Avro?
Yeah, they can work well with it because it's a JSON object.
It's a JSON object. Okay.
Yeah. So JSON pointer is for JSON. It's not for JSON schema. It's for JSON.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So So it works well because it's JSON.
That is his proposal. So I guess we already discussed it as we went. So does anyone else have any questions, anything they want to add to the discussion?
On the deprecated thing, I agree we don't deprecate it in version 3, but do we want to, where we're removing things for version 3, do we want to deprecate it in version 2 to give people a heads up that it's going away?
Yeah, we might. Yeah.
I mean, that's more a general comment than specifically to this issue, but it just made me think of that as you're sharing the screen there.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to deprecate something if you don't have the alternative?
Well, no.
Yeah.
Deprecating is like you can still use it, but at some point is going to be removed, right? So it's a signal that you should stop using it, and we can just send a message there saying like migrate to version 3, and that's how you stop using it. Right? That's the alternative.
But let's say that we add 2.5, we add this deprecation. And in 2.5, there is no alternative way to describe the schema format. So you say it's deprecated, right? But you give no alternative in 2.5 to.
That's too early. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's too early. I'll wait until we have version 3 out.
Okay. Okay, now I get it. So you want to deprecate it when 3.0 is out.
Exactly. Whatever 2.8, 2.10, whatever, then we can still release one more 2 point something with deprecations, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Right. How does that sound, Dale, to you?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Like, as we get closer to 3 and we start thinking about that transition, that maybe we do start looking at where we've removed things in 3, that we pave that path going from one to the other by deprecating the things we've taken out.
Makes sense to me.
And I wonder if this is something that we could be introducing, at least the one with schema format, the format and definition keywords. Well, now it's a breaking change. Now I was thinking if we could introduce it in version 2, but no, it's breaking the.
That depends, because you can allow both, right? But it will be a bit tricky because you can create this custom. I'm just going to call it custom schema object and allow you to define both the schema object and the custom schema object in a union.
Not sure that's possible, because we will have format and definition keywords, and those format and definition keywords could be part of JSON schema object that you're trying to define.
That's a problem,
because JSON schema is not strict about these things. Like, you can use whatever keyword you want. It doesn't have any meaning, but you can use whatever you want there. So yeah, you don't know if you're using this new format or you're using a JSON schema with these fields. Another way to do it, to introduce it, it's introducing it in a weird way, which is, I don't know, like something, I don't know. Yeah, we augment this schema object in async API with a schema format property, but no, because that will be what we were complaining before, that then even sub properties could just have their own custom schema format. Because no, okay, never mind. Too complicated for nothing. Nobody's asking for it, so yeah, let's not do it.
Okay, so let's see. So we kind of didn't like this custom schema keyword, where he wraps it within an object multiple times, right? You remember we talked about this, where he then outside of this object up here in the root of the schema, you could also define something like description, title, external docs. That didn't make much sense to have.
No, exactly. I think
double
you just
wrapping.
have format and definition alongside description and title and so on, right?
Yeah. And then this one is to be determined based on, so for 3.0, it doesn't make sense to deprecate it. It should just be removed. But we can look into whether it makes sense to deprecate it for 2. Whatever version we are at whenever we release version 3.
Will we be taking notes, or are you?
I'm just doing it. I'm using YouTube as my note taker.
Come on, I'm taking notes. No worries.
All right. And then possible to add JSON schema. I wouldn't say JSON schema keywords. I would just say that we can add extra properties to define some extra metadata, if that makes sense. But yeah. And then that's basically it, right? Kind of the review of the PR. Does anyone else have any more questions or any other takes?
Not about it, but I'll like to present something once we're done with this. I mean, think out loud with all of you.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Let's see. I don't think we have any more questions, and I don't think I have. I don't think I have anything for the agenda as well.
No, I don't think so.
Does anyone else have anything they want to introduce or ask or?
Yeah, feel free. In the meantime, I take notes. Yeah.
Dale, do you have anything you want to bring up?
Nope, not from me, Tar.
Okay. So Fran, all you. Then you can write notes and present at the same time. I know your multitasking is the absolute best.
Yeah. So my idea is that https:// that I'm multitasking, sorry. Sorry, I can't multitask with this. It's too much. I'm trying to let me just take some notes quickly. So we were like speaking about this deprecation and what else, and the custom schema, right? Field
Deprecation, and he wraps it within kind of like a double wrap of an object.
Okay.
That didn't make much sense.
Consider deprecating schema format on v2 and something once we have, I don't know, once we have 3.0 out or about to, no, once we have 3.0 out. Once we have the real alternative, otherwise. So that's consider the deprecating schema format, and why is schema custom schema needed? And there's something else. There's a schema format, and like being able to mix and match different.
In terms of referencing, or this where he mixes multiple schema formats together, right?
mix and match different schema in a single schema object might be too much. Okay, just this.
And I think that was it.
Okay. So, yes. Show. Let me share my screen. Yes, I should be able to share my screen.
I think you're co-host, right?
Yeah.
Host. Yeah.
I should be. I'm paying for it. I will be worried if I cannot manage my own money. I cannot manage the stuff that I pay myself. So. All right, so this is the window. So is it readable? Shall I make it a little bit bigger, maybe?
It's all good from
That
us.
looks okay. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So as you can all see, I'm just playing around. These files don't even have a name yet because I'm just playing around with an idea. And just before I continue developing the idea, I wanted to know what you think. So on version 3, so I've been playing with the idea that I'm already changing version 3, right? So I'm seeing where version 3 is going, and I was like, wait, maybe we can still improve it before we get to create a pull request. So when you see remains the same as we've suggested so far, right? Not that it remains the same as v2. So yeah. So what I'm doing here is I'm introducing the concept of a new concept here, which is domains. I'll talk about later. Let me just focus on something that I think it's more interesting for now. So I'm changing the way servers are defined, and there should be the possibility to do something like this. And then, I don't know, I installed GitHub Copilot, and it's bothering me. Damn it. I'm just gonna get used to this. That's so yeah, let's say let's say that we do something like this. I don't know. Damn it. Then Copilot. So we should be able to have something like this, that we define servers, two different kinds of servers. I'm okay if we don't use this syntax and we use some other kind of syntax. What I'm not worried here is about the syntax, is about the concept itself. So this concept is not new. We already talked about it. Like we should have local servers and remote servers. So remote servers usually being brokers or other APIs that we might call, right? So yeah, and local servers is usually an HTTP or a WebSocket server. Not usually, it cannot be other thing as far as I know. So it's an HTTP or a WebSocket server that my application is exposing. So my application is a server, right? So that's why I'm calling it local. Never mind, we can call it whatever you want, but yeah, local as interfaces, server interfaces that my application is exposing, right? So seeing this, let's say we can fairly say that local servers can only be HTTP and WebSocket. So there is a cool thing about it, and it's like if it's a HTTP server or WebSocket server, then it means that the server definition can be exactly the same as an OpenAPI server, except for the support of WebSocket and bindings, of course, because they don't support WebSockets or bindings. That's something from Async API. But well, that is something that we can push on OpenAPI so they support WebSockets, and then it's just a little bit easier, right? And then, or at some point we can just or what we can do is that we support OpenAPI server definitions on Async API because they will be a subset of our server definition, local server definition, right? So so they will be compatible. And so that is one thing. And yeah, so why am I splitting this into two kind of things, like local and remote and domains? So when I did this, I was thinking more about who's the owner of things, right? Who's the owner of the server, right? So if I'm having here, let's not call it production, but call it my WebSocket API server, right? This is the owner of this server is my application. This application is the owner of the server. Actually, I'm calling it like my WebSocket API because it's a traditional API, but just using WebSockets instead of HTTP. But it's a client server model. So, and I am the server here. So this application is a server. So this is my server. This is me. This is owned by me, right? Cool. So then Mosquito, for instance, which is a broker, right? Or Kafka here, or whatever you want to use. Am I the owner of this? No, the application is not the owner of the broker. The application is just connecting to the broker, but the owner of the broker is the company, a division of the company, maybe. Yeah, we don't know. For sure, it's not the application. The application is not the owner of a broker, of a remote server, right? So that's why I was concerned that maybe we shouldn't be defining these things here, right? And going a little bit forward, so channels, same concept. Like, should we be able to define channels that our application is not exposing? Because, like I'm saying here, these channels are now only the channels exposed by this application. So WebSocket channels, socket.io channels, or even rooms, or whatever you want to call them, or workspaces as well, or HTTP servers and events. But like I am the server, I'm exposing these communication channels, and I am the owner of these things. So this is my application definition. I'm gonna define the channels that I'm exposing myself, and that's why they are defined here in this file, because I am the owner, right? So yeah, that is one of the thoughts. So that's it. Then I had to introduce something here, which is what I call domain, right? And domains are for, like global assets, or for if you're doing domain-driven design. So this is your domain stuff, right? Your domain assets, except the applications, like messages, channels, servers, yeah, meaning probably brokers, right, in this case. So yeah, I decided that maybe it's a good time that we split these two definitions in two different specs, right? Because, yeah, let me go back one more time here to the application definition. In version 3, as I proposed in my solve, publish, subscribe, confusion, and so on, I was saying something like, if a file doesn't have operations, then it's a menu. It's like a definition of channels and servers and messages and so on. But if it has an operations object, then it means it's an application. Well, that kind of polyform, how you call this, polymorphism, feels really weird to me. Like an async API file, depending on this apparently innocent keyword here, operations might mean a thing or might mean another thing, the whole file, right? So I was like, I'm not sure, like we should be going this way. It's a little bit weird because this is the application definition, and if we remove the operations is a menu of all the things in the organization or in a specific domain. So that is too much. So then I decided to go ahead and let's create another spec, which is like, it's not another different spec, it's just the same spec, but with a different concept, right? So it's that menu, right? It's that what we used to call menu of channels and brokers and all this stuff. So here I'm introducing the concept of brokers, servers, channels, right? Everything except operations. So you cannot have operations in an async API domain file because it's not defining an application, it's defining assets that you might have in a specific domain of your company or a specific domain of your architecture, which luckily is matching your company organization as well. So yeah, does it make sense so far? So
yeah, that's okay. It's a lot of change, but
yeah, it's a lot of change. I know. It's a whole new spec, by the way. So actually, this is a new spec. It's based on the other specs, but yeah. So yeah. So as you can see, brokers here can now be called brokers. We don't have to call them servers anymore. So, and they can have the format, the async API server format, which is URL, protocol version, blah blah blah, all this stuff, right? And servers can only be HTTP or WebSocket servers. So there's no way that you have something here that is not HTTP or WebSocket. We can even just allow having URL, no protocol or protocol version. Maybe protocol version is fine, but no protocol. And the protocol is here on the URL, and we can restrict by the beginning of this, right? Like you can only start with HTTP, HTTPS, WS, or WSS, right? So making things a little bit more compatible with OpenAPI in this case. And here the channels are exactly the opposite as in the application. This channel here are the channels in the broker. So these are usually broker topics, commonly known as broker topics, broker queues, all these kind of things. And
so this is defined for the broker.
This is that
in the domain. It's defined for the broker itself within this domain, right?
Yes. So if this broker, I just created a global domain for the whole company, but yeah, you can have like multiple domains maybe in your company. And if the broker is shared across the whole company, across all domains, you can still have like a common or global company domain, right? Where you define the broker. But if a specific channel is meant to be used only inside the specific domain, then you can define this channel in its respective domain file. Or if it's going to be used across the whole organization and not just inside that specific domain, then you can put it on the global domain file. If you don't know where to put it, just create a global domain file and dump everything there. That will also work, right? So if you don't know where to put it, probably it's because you don't care. So you can just have a single file with everything, right? So having this kind of file, I was reluctant to introduce this new kind of file in the beginning, but I'm afraid we don't have any better option, because we started async API as as a clone of OpenAPI for other protocols and messaging and so on. But as opposed to OpenAPI, where the communication is point to point, there are only two actors involved, the client and the server. Here, there are multiple nodes, multiple actors involved, right? And there's no server, they're all clients, or there might be servers and clients as well, aside from the broker, which is a shared thing. So I have the feeling that we cannot continue restricting ourselves to a single application definition file, because yeah, another thing that I was thinking is that if we place everything here in channels, then what is the application file that should contain these channel definitions and this server's definition? Which one? Like you have 10 or 100 applications, all of them subscribing and publishing to a broker. Which one is the one containing the channel's definition? Why not all of them? Obviously, because you don't want to repeat yourself, right? But then what we usually recommend is like, no, you have to extract the definitions. And then in each of the files, in each of the applications, you reference that third file. So that third file already exists. It is just not yet standardized, right? So people are already doing this. They're extracting this information into another file. That it's just that this file doesn't have a specific structure. If we give it a structure, we give it a name, then we can create tooling to take advantage of this. Like for instance, with this file, with the domain file, we could draw a graph of available brokers, available servers, available channels, all the messages that are flowing there. We cannot draw who's publishing and who's subscribing because we don't have this information in this file, but at least we can set the stage like, hey, so here's the broker, this is the channels contained in this broker. This file can be used for discovery, basically. We can even create discovery systems like, hey, I need to find a topic channel that contains a message that contains the user email, right? You start typing and you get the information filtered. So here are the topics or channels that contain this information. So for discovery, this will be super cool. So that is a use case for this, right? And that is what people have been asking. Actually, Dale, I don't know if Dale is still in the call. I think he quit, right?
Yeah, I think his Zoom died on him, but he's in the chat, I think, maybe.
Okay, so it's because I don't know if I can, while I'm sharing the screen, I don't know if I can see people without camera, or I don't know. Anyway, he will see the recording. So so Dale, when I had my first conversation with Dale on Thinking Out Loud, this was exactly the use case IBM was looking for. having a file where to define all the channels, all the messages, all the servers, and so on. They were not interested at all if it's a publish or if it's a subscribe. They don't care because they're not looking to define an application. They're looking to define a domain. It can be the whole company domain, can be just a subset of it, right? So that's up to the architect or the architects to define. So yeah, that is what the domain is for, let's say, right? So so as you can see here I'm referencing servers that are defined. So these local servers don't have to be defined on the domain, right? These servers, so say for instance, this is a server, right? A WebSocket API, but we can create a WebSocket client, right? So if we create a WebSocket client, it will be, remote server, and they will be referencing either the the domains, either the server defined in the domain file here, or they could be just coming here and saying something like it is here. I could be just coming here and say, this is just from my client definition, I can make a direct reference to my server definition. It's coupling both. It's coupling the server and the client, but the server and the client are usually coupled anyway. So, so that shouldn't be a problem. But if it's a problem, and that's why I was doing this, you can move this definition to the domain, right? And then the client and the server will reference the definition on the domain, right? On that third file that we were talking about. That is already there. It's already existing. Just people are putting whatever structure they prefer there. And yeah. Any questions so far? Looks like it's the first time you hear it, Jonas.
It's not, but but it's still a lot to digest.
Yes, it's a lot.
Or it is and it isn't, in a sense, because most of it we are already doing, right? Exactly as you're saying, because as soon as you start to tinker around with brokers and you have multiple applications and you want to define the channels for them, you have this problem of like, is it the application, like which application is owning this channel, for example?
Yeah.
Or where do you define it and where should you reference it? And some post them out into a specific file for this, the same that you have now, but you just call domains instead, which is for the broker itself, where it's like, I define everything that's within this specific set of domain, whatever that is. And then you have then you have one reference to that domain from each application and says, well, it's part of this domain. It has this message definition, this topic. Here's the definition for it, right? And in that sense, it makes.
I would like to reinforce that this is already happening. You know, like people are already doing that. And we're already recommending that, like extract the common definitions to another file and reference this file from all the applications. We're just giving that third file a name and a format. Yep. And so we can take advantage of it, right? But this is already happening. Like, I don't know anyone using async API for broker-based architectures, of course, that is not doing this. If you want to, for instance, for the case of client server, a simple WebSocket API, let's say, which I know that Lucas is really concerned, right? So for the case of WebSocket, let me just play a little bit with this. For the case of WebSockets, it will be as easy as not having domains. So domains it's optional, right? So you don't have domains, you don't define things. Sorry, it's here. So you define things. Where is it? Here. Okay.
Just a heads up, we have 1 minute left. Plus minus 4.
1 minute? Okay. Okay. So if we're doing a WebSocket API, then we have these servers here, we have channels, which is cool, components, messages, post lag, blah, blah, blah. And then this channel. Yeah, if you're not using any broker at all, right? If you're not using any broker at all, you can just have a common async API file without domains or anything, because you don't need it. You don't need any domain. Everything is contained in your application definition. If you have a client, you can make a direct reference to your server, if that's your preferred way to do it. For instance, for simple examples, for instance, you will not be bothering people with domain creations and so on, right? That's too much, but the possibility is there when it's needed. So yeah, that's why I think it's a good idea. Since we don't have so much time, I'm gonna go fast through this. And this is now what I'm gonna talk about now is completely separated. So I think this is a proposal. This is something that we might want to consider. And there's another thing. So
just to clarify, it's not in an issue yet, and it's
no,
not
it is not in an issue.
so,
I just wanted to share,
hypothetical.
so you can give me thoughts. But since there are not much people in the call, I will probably paste this into an issue and get feedback there as well. So yeah, so I'll do that. But for this one is another thing. So I'm now talking about something else, and this is extra stuff for after 3.0. I want to make it clear. So since people are requesting that we support also HTTP as a first-class citizen, so they can define REST APIs and message-oriented, message-driven architectures in the same place, we could, instead of offering this HTTP binding with lots of potential, right? We could instead be accepting the paths object from OpenAPI in the root of an async API file. Not perfect solution, but it opens a possibility, right? So this is something that we are right now discussing, we're thinking, and I can't remember the issue, but yeah, there's an issue on the bindings about it. About the HTTP binding supporting multiple methods, right? So if you can paste the link, that will be cool.
We'll do it.
And so that means that this object here, this whole object paths, this is defined by OpenAPI, not by us. So, but there are a few things here. One of them is that this schema definition is different. It's using a different version than the one that we're using. So that is probably something we will have to solve, or we pair with OpenAPI and we upgrade to the same version they're using, right? I'm reluctant to do it soon. I mean, as I said, this is for after 3.0, so we have time. But I'm reluctant to do it now because this JSON schema version doesn't have really good tooling support. So yeah, if we don't have tool support, we have nothing basically. So yeah, and another reason why I may be reluctant to do this as it is here, as in this example, is that we're mixing operations here. So this is a post operation. It is effectively an operation, and we have operations here. So and we're also about to accept and defining how to perform, like request, reply, and so on, right? So so yeah, that might be a little bit chaotic, but it's going to be useful for most of the users nevertheless, right? So yes, anyway, something to think about it in the future, and also mentioning that it might open the door for linking to GraphQL schemas and gRPC schemas as well, or protobuf, and not protobuf, gRPC. So yeah, it opens the possibility to expand to all these things that are mentioned in the roadmap, right? That we become like the number one specification to define all the kind of APIs, right? So yeah, it doesn't mean that, but without reinventing the wheel, right? So integrating existing specs like OpenAPI, like GraphQL, like gRPC. It's just that from async API, you should be able to have like a reference to existing files, so you don't have to worry about it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Maybe I'm just thinking as I'm talking, maybe one way to do this is mimicking what I just did with GraphQL, and we can have this, right? And we just have this, right? So yeah. Well, actually, this is not path. This link. That's it, right? So yeah, my Open API YAML, right? So maybe that's a way, and it doesn't clash with our with our system here. So yeah. Anyway, food for thought.
It's interesting, right? And it's also something that's kind of like there's many sides to this, because it also complicates the async API specification itself because of these classes clashes within keywords that all of a sudden you can, for example, reuse references between async API definitions and what's defined elsewhere. It also creates kind of a clash. So the devil's advocate, or the opposite view of what you're proposing here, is kind of outlined it in the issue that I posted, but it's provide better tooling for converting from whatever else specification there is to async API.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of the extreme way, especially if you are used to Open API and still want to use it. So
that's definitely one way. Thing is that if we do this, if we create another syntax for defining HTTP APIs or REST APIs, then we are reinventing the wheel. And
yep.
I don't know. I don't think people will be happy with this, but many people already have Open API files and they just want to use them. I know we can still provide tooling for automation processes so they can convert Open API to async API. But what if they have both at the same time? So they want to have Open API and async API at the same time because they're using services, third-party services, like you know, like
gateways or whatever.
Yeah, like gateways, or like exactly like gateways or the like, that only support Open API. These third-party services don't support async API yet, so they need this Open API file, and they will want to keep iterating on the Open API file. So and they will want to keep iterating on the async API file. So at some point, so it's not as easy as converting, because then you will be overwriting the async API file, right? So it is more than that. You somehow need to merge the two changes in both documents, complicating things a little bit. But that's not just that. Like, we're assuming that people have CI pipelines, and many banks and big companies don't have CI pipelines, and or at least they don't make a lot of usage of it. And this is something that maybe one team can start doing, but not the whole company at the same time. So yeah, it is difficult. And also, if as a company, just a third reason for this, if the whole company wants to migrate, let's say a crazy architect says, I'm going to migrate everything to async API and let's make it work. They might not be able to do it, because they might not have a directory of all the Open API files they have, right? So you need to be scanning all the repos in your company, searching for Open API files to convert them. Right. So so it increases everything's possible, everything's doable, but the benefit that we're providing doesn't outweigh the difficulty and the time it's gonna take to do it, right? So, and that's the problem. Like, people will not feel encouraged to migrate because it's too much. and it's not providing enough value for them to do it, right? So,
Yep.
so yeah, having tooling to migrate from one version to another is cool. We should have it, but it's not the final solution, right? So we should probably be integrating more seamlessly. So like
Yeah.
I was just mentioning now, like maybe just referencing an external OpenAPI file, and that's it. And then you can keep working on both if you want, and that's it. And we make it clear whatever's on the OpenAPI file, it's of less importance than what you have on the operations. So whatever you have on operations is overriding what is on the OpenAPI file, something like this. Just in case they clash, you have an order of preference.
And it's all about finding that balance between what's usable and what's long-term makes more sense.
Yes.
In case of not overcomplicating everything. And also just to highlight, like we have reinvented the wheel already with HTTP bindings, because nothing is, as I understand it, based off of OpenAPI, right?
Not yet, yeah.
Yeah.
We're already reinventing the wheel there. And that's why the first thought was, okay, let's just make the HTTP binding an OpenAPI document or a subset of it. But it's not really viable.
It has some problems.
It has many problems, yeah. So
and it's highlighted in the issue that I linked to. But yeah.
Exactly. And I guess that once we explore GraphQL in the future, gRPC and all this stuff, many different problems will arise as well. But
as they always do.
But yeah, it's a matter of, we need to think about keeping a balance of a well-defined spec versus something that is immediately useful for the user, right? So having OpenAPI support will be immediately useful for the user. It might create some edge cases. Then maybe the only thing we have to do there in the spec is define those edge cases and say, and define how tooling should behave in these cases, right?
Yep.
Anyway,
That's
food for thought. Just I thought it would be interesting.
Good way to end it.
Yeah, good way.
All right, so I guess that's it for this meeting. And thanks you all for participating. And see you next time.